What's up? I'm B and welcome to my channel. Today I am making a video that I never thought I would be compelled to make, and that is a video defending Jesse Lee Peterson.
It's amazing.
Now, if you've watched my channel for a while, you probably know that I did a video about him a few months ago, back in October, and I gave some background on him. Basically, the reason I was covering him is because Paul and Morgan had gone on his channel for a debate, and I was actually pleasantly surprised at how they presented themselves and how they handled themselves, and so I just kind of went over that. But Jesse Lee Peterson, if you didn't catch that video, he is a religious figure, I guess. He has a YouTube channel. He goes live on it pretty much every day, and he is ultra conservative.
Giving their children over to the radical blacks. The whole Black Lives Matter mess. And we all know that Black Lives Matter is a far left, liberal, godless, radical organization. They hate God. They hate the nuclear family. They hate America. They hate anything that's good. Founded by a bunch of fat, black, radical lesbians. And they are teaching this in the schools. And the white parents of the white children are still sending their children to the schools. They're sending their children to the schools anyway. And the only way that the white parents are doing that is that they have no love for their children. And the women don't want to stay home and watch over the man's children, so the hell with what's happening to them at school. Just get them out of the house. I don't want to be dealing with them. I want to go to work and pretend I'm equal to a man.
Jesse is black, but he also says a lot of things that, in my opinion, are anti-black.
Who are earning the grades, those who are earning their way, and not based on color. And I've said over and over and over again that black Americans are not suffering due to this phony idea of racism or police brutality or slavery or Jim Crow. It's about the family. When fathers and mothers get married, they teach their children how to be good at what they do, how to earn their way. And this is not happening in the black families right now for the most part. And that black Americans are being used to destroy America and not build it up. Sure. And it's time to vote these people out. So I want to remind you, too, that Abraham Lincoln, and the last time I saw him on a photo or something, he was white. And so I was checking with my producer this morning. I'm like, wasn't it a white man that freed the blacks? Or were there any mention of him on Juneteenth? Did anybody say, let's take a moment and just appreciate Abraham Lincoln, the white man in his own country, for setting the black people free, ending slavery? Did anybody pause for that for a minute, show appreciation? Where's your appreciation? But instead, they act like they're still enslaved, and mentally they are. But a white man freed y'all. What the? That wasn't mentioned that I've seen yet.
Jesse is also very much against homosexuality.
You know, we should have never fallen for this idea that, oh, we just want to come out of the closet. Just let us out of the closet. And then they say, oh, we want to go to church, but we don't want to be talked about at church. So a lot of preachers stop mentioning that homosexuality is wrong, that something has gone wrong, and they must repent and return to God. Now they have taken over the churches. There are a lot of preachers who are afraid to speak out against so-called Pride Month. You know, I started the White History Month in July. This is our 4th year coming up when we're celebrating white history. And what I've noticed that in America, a country that was founded by white people and created by white people, one of the greatest countries on this side of heaven. And so white people invited all this other stuff to happen, but you could celebrate everything but white history. We must remember white history, because if it wasn't for that, there would be no America. And so they got Black history, women history, Mexican history, so-called gay pride. What's pride? What's happy about being perverted. There's nothing good about that, living in sin, right? But we celebrate, I don't, but they celebrate that. But when it comes to white history, they're afraid to even mention white history. But we got to bring that back because that's who made America great. We got to show our appreciation. And not one Christian should be celebrating gay pride. They should be praying that these people repent and overcome the fallen state, return to the Father.
He calls pretty much every man that he doesn't like a beta male.
This Trudeau can't even handle his own wife. He's a beta male, but he controlled the country. Beta! I'm telling you, beta! But he controlled the country while when he go home at night, he's controlled by his wife.
He says that all men need to learn how to forgive their mothers because they can't help that they were born women. And so that's why they're so bad, because Satan is their daddy. Not just like a specific situation where somebody needed to forgive their mom. It's like, oh, you're fighting with your girlfriend. Well, have you forgiven your mother? Have you called her and told her that you forgive her for everything she did to you? And there was one caller who Jesse asked that to, and he was like, well, no, like, what do you mean? Did I forgive her? Forgive her for what? And Jesse basically just said, like, without knowing anything about this dude's mom, that she had traumatized him. It was her fault that he was the way that he was and that he was having issues with his partner. And so he needed to call his mom and forgive her. He is anti-woman, anti-LGBTQ, anti-black, in my opinion. And I think that's a really rational opinion to come to when you hear some of the things that he says.
Unless we turn this thing around. Women can't, again, it's two things really. It's the creation of it and then the maintenance of it to maintain it. The women cannot do either of those things. And so, yeah, it was a massive mistake to educate women.
I noticed that everything the women get involved with, it turned to hell. In the home, the kids turn to hell. In the school, look what's happening in the schools now. When I was going to school years ago, it was peace in the school. It wasn't this mess. And look what's happening in the churches. They're taking over the churches, and the churches are just no good. Nothing but mess. The government is out of control after women taking over. The media after women taking over. Everything they touch is just go. It remind me of the blacks. What?
The blacks?
Oh, everything they touch is just
no, it's true.
Messes up.
Yeah.
And the people be grinning and pretending that is fine. Because they're afraid. They're afraid of the women. They're afraid of the name calling. They're afraid of what the?
I know. Insanity's running the show. It's crazy.
It's insane. And they act like the women are smart and equal. Women are not smart and they're not equal to men. It's just a reality. We have to bring back the order of God. That's the only thing that's going to work. The men got to take over.
However, as homophobic as Jesse Lee Peterson may be, homophobia and certain members of the manosphere have now forced my hand, and I am choosing to come on here and address a documentary that was recently made. An organization named Militant Church put out a documentary earlier in June called Amazing Disgrace, where they allege that Jesse Lee Peterson is a homo super predator. Their words, not mine. Essentially, there's a group of several men who are coming forward saying that Jesse groomed them and that Jesse took advantage of them and just making a lot of accusations. And first and foremost, I need to point out that all of these men were adults at the time that they allegedly engaged in certain acts with Jesse. So by definition, it can't be grooming. But I think that the documentary makers knew what they were doing when they had people phrasing it like that. And there was a statement from 21 Studios regarding this, and they're trying to say like, oh, well, we don't care that he's gay. We're not upset that he's gay because we've had gay speakers. And 21 Studios is a company that puts on conventions for more conservative Christians. And so they're like, oh no, we had a gay speaker at one of our conventions. And so it's not the fact that he's gay, it's the fact that he's a groomer. But he's not technically a groomer. And so I'm not saying that what happened to these men wasn't inappropriate. I'm not saying that they are lying. I want to acknowledge that they felt that they were victimized by Jesse. However, I think in them sharing their stories with the Militant Church and then the way it was presented in this documentary is extremely misleading, and they're focusing on the wrong thing. In my opinion, they're focusing on the haha, gotcha, he's gay thing, and we don't even know if he's gay. Jesse is obviously stated that he's not. However, he's being accused of engaging in sexual acts with men. So maybe he is, maybe he's bisexual. I don't know. Not my place to know, although, I get why people would be upset because of the things that he says about gay people. But I think they're focusing on the gotcha moment as opposed to talking about coercive control and power imbalances and how maybe Jesse made them feel uncomfortable or was trying to talk them into things that they wouldn't have initiated themselves. And you'll see it as we play these clips. I don't ever want to say that someone is lying when they say that they felt taken advantage of. However, a lot of these clips just give me pause. So again, I'm not trying to say that this didn't happen, that it's not true, that, they're not victims. I just think maybe their motivation in exposing these things about Jesse is a little bit off, or they were misguided in working with the documentary makers that they worked with in order to get their stories out there, because it was framed in a way that really doesn't quite make sense. And again, you'll see what I'm talking about now, because I'm going to stop talking and play you the clips. Oh, before we get to those clips, I did want to read an opinion piece from 21 Studios. The title is Infamous Gay Basher Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson Exposed as Homosexual Super Predator. So this was published originally on June 22nd of this year. And it says, I'm not even sure how to begin this letter. So much has happened in the past few days that my jaw is still on the floor a bit. The truth is sad, sick, twisted, and dark. Jesse Lee Peterson has been a popular speaker at 21 Summit events since 2020, giving a total of 5 speeches across all 3 of our conferences, including the 22 convention, Make Women Great Again, 2020 only. He is also a self-proclaimed Christian pastor and has been a popular radio call-in show host for north of 30 years in California. He operates a 501c3 nonprofit religious organization called Bond and 2 YouTube channels, each with over 300,000 subscribers. A professional documentary called Amazing Disgrace, released recently, exposing Jesse with 4 accusers on camera, one of which is an alumni 21 Summit attendee, as a lifelong homosexual and groomer/sexual predator. This is problematic for several obvious reasons. One that needs to be stated up front and clearly is that Jesse, on his own shows and platforms, is a notorious homo basher. He routinely mocks homosexuals and tells them on air that they are going to hell, that Satan is their daddy, etc. He's been consistent on this for decades publicly, and per being a Christian pastor, this is in line with what Christians are supposed to believe, homosexuality being a sin in their religion. Disagree with that, but that's a more nuanced conversation for another time. The author then goes on to say, thou shalt not stick your dong in dudes' doo-doo holes. So he's a homo predator and a groomer and taking advantage of people, but we're going to make a joke and say that thou shalt not stick your dong in men's doo-doo holes. Okay. And the reason I'm reading this from 21 Studios is obviously because they wrote an opinion piece on it, and they also uploaded the documentary to their YouTube channel with permission from Militant Church. I've never witnessed this level of extreme hypocrisy and fraud before in my professional career, and I believe it far surpasses the fraud of both Jack Murphy and Rollo Tomasi even combined. Most manosphere frauds are doing it to scam wounded men out of money, usually small amounts for book sales, courses, and such. At worst, they are kind of festering unresolved wounds of their own and spreading the damage to other men. This situation actually involves religious fraud, closeted homosexuality of a public figure, and sexual predation of real victims, one of which is a former attendee of 21 Summit. To say I've been extremely angry the past few days is an understatement. What's worse, and what really set me off, was independently confirming that the fundamental allegations are true and factual. This shit actually happened. Jesse Lee Peterson has engaged in long-term homosexual activity and some form of sexual grooming/predatory behavior with wounded, broken men coming to him for answers. I confirm this to the point that I'm willing to take legal responsibility for those claims being facts of reality rather than only pointing to the documentary itself. How did you come to this realization, or how did you determine that these are facts and these situations actually happened? You know, my impulse always is to believe victims. However, we need to be very careful in the language that we use when talking about things that people are accused of. You know, and in my last 2 videos regarding inappropriate relationships in the church and people being taken advantage of, The first one with John B. Lowe, he admitted that it happened. And in the second one with Hagar and Bruxy Cavey, an independent third-party investigation determined that sexual harassment happened, and Bruxy was arrested. And so once you have some of those things, like those concrete things, yes, you can say like this happened. But without having something solid to stand on, I think it's really important to say this allegedly happened, as opposed to, well, I've confirmed that this is real and factual. How so? How did you do it? Did Jesse admit to it? I doubt it. Like, I don't know. Are police involved? What's going on? How do we know that this for a fact happened? This is the ultimate possible betrayal for any of our speakers, and I've publicly gone to total war since Monday exposing this fraudulent homosexual super predator. I had private minor reservations about Jesse, which is part of why he was excluded from the 22 convention in 2021, but nothing even remotely approaching the total truth here. I don't think even an FBI background check would have uncovered this, and it appears he's been getting away with and covering it up for 20 to 30 years, possibly longer. A lot of people I know are still in shock, including speakers in private and our fans in public. Many are outraged, going through the beginning stages of grief, denial, and anger. A lot of young men and women looked up to this guy, conservatives, Christians, and just regular people looking for answers in a culture that hates masculinity and femininity. Jesse had a significant overlap with manosphere content and topics in particular over the past 5 years, maybe longer. It was all fake, all fraud, and all lies the entire time. This psychopath crafted a public persona to scam people out donations and actually prey on men in real life for decades. The war to make the manosphere great again continues. While this has been a rather gruesome turn of events, it is ultimately healthy and part of the process for healing the manosphere, purging it of frauds and predators one by one. The feminists and their Vichy male allies will use this against us as it fits the cartoon villain they built in their heads perfectly. This is unfortunate, but also just how the world works. There are millions of evil people in the world who engage in varying degrees of up, immoral, twisted shit. I want to close on a simple point that I specifically don't care that Jesse is gay. We've had another popular speaker since 2017 who is also gay. Nobody cares because he doesn't lie, hide, bullshit, or make a big deal about it. What I care about with Jesse is the grooming/predatory behavior and the extreme level of fraud and hypocrisy. This man lied to me, all of our speakers, all of our attendees, and the fans of 21 Studios, and all of the manosphere for years. He did it with a straight face and has shown zero remorse. This shit is truly vile, dishonorable, unmanly, and disturbing. This guy is one of the most famous homosexual bashers on the internet. He has brought great shame to my company, my event, conservative politics, American Christianity, and the manosphere itself. I hate this man with a burning passion, and I think everyone should. Do give the documentary a watch and share it with friends. A Woman and May Jesse Burn in Hell. Written by Anthony Dream Johnson, first president of the Manosphere, founder 21 Summit and the 22 Convention, CEO 21 Studios. Doesn't it make you feel comfortable that a person like that is the CEO of a company? So that's obviously Anthony's take on this situation. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the clips now and hear directly from the people who were involved.
Right around that time, I also had started a TV show. I was doing a public access TV show in LA, and with a friend of mine who had gotten off heroin and wanted to, he asked me to be involved in the show to help other people get off drugs and things like that. So we started a show, and one of our first guests was Jesse and another gentleman from Bond. So we did a couple shows with them. And from that time forward, right after the show happened, Jesse and I talked in the green room, backstage. And right off the bat, he started asking me stuff. Jesse's very forward with his questioning and things like that. So he actually asked me right after that show, are you gay?
Rooney's characterization shows that Jesse allegedly used similar grooming tactics as other homo predators, like Saginaw priest Father Robert DeLand, who asked similar questions when preying on a young man in 2017.
So Jesse asked his friend, Patrick, outright, are you gay? And that's a grooming technique of other homo predators. And that language, I know that you can tell from my tone of voice, I don't like that language. That language is really deceptive, and it just contributes to negative stereotypes surrounding the LGBTQ community. Calling somebody a homo predator It's gross and it doesn't need to happen. But I don't understand how that's a grooming technique, is to straight up ask another adult, competent male if they are gay.
While we were at the conference, we stayed in Virginia, near DC. So we were sitting on the bed together, and all of a sudden he turned to me and just looked at me, and he said, "What do you want to do? What do you want to do?" And he said it in a tone that was really insistent. And I'd never seen this tone from him before. It was like kind of scary. It kind of scared me. Like what? What do you want to do? I knew what he meant, and then I told him, okay. And at first I'm scared, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm playing along here. It kind of threw me off my game, I guess, in a way. I think later I realized that's kind of something that people do sometimes. It's like the devil works in a certain way by intimidating you, and it throws you off your normal game. And so he said, "What do you want to do?" And he was like, "Okay, I'm scared." And then I told him what I want to do. I mentioned sex acts, that he knew about, that I had already talked to him about, that I was interested in. And next thing you know, he's ripping his clothes off and coming at me, basically. And I did the same, took my clothes off. And next thing you know, we're fully at it, having, not getting detail here, but basically full-on sexual acts.
Rooney's recollections show that Jesse mirrored DeLand's sexual advances almost identically.
I love you. Love you too. I know. What are we gonna do? I don't know. No, what are we gonna do, really?
Rooney's description shows that after their sexual encounter, Jesse began intertwining his private homosexualism with blasphemy.
After we had just done the first sexual act, and then ever since then, he told me that once we did this, I was born again. Okay,
so hearing that, I do see how that could be something where it would be an inappropriate relationship. It would be, even though Patrick said, like, oh, well, this is what I want to do, and he engaged in it, it could have been because he felt coerced. It could have been because he felt intimidated. And Patrick and Jesse allegedly had this sexual relationship for 10 years. That also does not disqualify this from being abuse, or this doesn't disqualify the situation, the relationship, from being harmful or out of coercion and guilt, as opposed to, mutual enjoyment. However, I do still take issue with them framing this as grooming, because I think it's inaccurate, and it kind of shoots your credibility in the foot if you're not willing to take a look at these things and put accurate words on them. It sounds like a hit piece as opposed to actually trying to get the truth out there, right?
Jesse couldn't handle the relationship ending, offering him several bribes to get him back to LA. It's typical for homo predators to try and cover their tracks using a cornucopia of strategies to shut people up. In the case of Father DeLand, it was now deceased Saginaw Bishop Joseph Sistone, who remained silent on DeLand's abuse for years.
They keep making this comparison to Robert DeLand, who was accused of and put in jail for sexual assault of teenage boys. And I do feel like there's a very important distinction to be made, that was an adult and teenage boys. This is Jesse with other adult men. And again, that does not make it so that there's no way this could be abusive. There's no way that this could be assault. I'm not saying that, and I know that most of you get it and you understand where I'm coming from, but it's YouTube, so I feel like I need to explicitly state that. Men can assault other grown men, but it's an unfair comparison to say that Jesse is just like Robert DeLand, because the situations were different. All right, next we're going to hear from another person in the documentary.
Former Bond House manager, 50-year-old Robert Santner, alleges he witnessed similarly strange behavior in 2021 between Jesse and current Bond producer James Hake.
What I witnessed, him and Jesse were hugging each other intensely, rubbing each other's shoulder down stuff, and he came to a point where I actually saw him kissing him on the cheek. And stuff on the hallway, and talking all kinds. I can't remember what the words he said, but there were a lot of giggling in the hallway in his James room. And then there was even one time that just really shocked the living hell out of me. is I went to the laundry room stuff. I mean, after I took the laundry out, and then when I got out, and there was a door open in Jesse's room, and there I saw Jesse was sitting in the bed, and while James Hake was wrapped around bed sheets, completely around like a burrito with his head sticking out. And Jesse was like embracing him and hugging him and stuff, and then kissing him on the forehead. And I was like, hey, are you all right?
Hake, to this day, is an ardent defender of Jesse and his ministry, essentially helping him ostracize all the men accusing Jesse of homo predation.
Okay, so Robert just said that he saw Jesse Lee Peterson and James Hake being giggly, touching each other. James was wrapped up like a burrito in bed sheets, and Jesse was kissing him on the forehead. To me, those things sound like consensual activities. Now, if they weren't, and James felt that he was being abused or preyed on, I think it is wildly inappropriate for somebody else to come on here and be like, look, Jesse's a scumbag because here's one of his victims. Like, to out a victim like that, I think is inappropriate and not okay. However, if this was a consensual thing as well, it's also not appropriate to out somebody. That's kind of the issue I have, because, you know, it's one of two things. Either James is a victim of sexual harassment, at the least, if this is true and he didn't want to engage in this behavior, and you're outing him as a victim before he's ready to come out, or it's two grown adult men engaging in, I don't even know what you would consider that, just like flirtatious actions, I suppose, and you're trying to make it seem way more sinister than it was. And I understand that there's a few levels to this because Jesse is so ardently and strongly anti-LGBTQ. Like, he says homophobic things. He publicly denounces homosexuality. And so I think there is a conversation to be had about people who are so just vocal about being against something and then finding out that they're engaging in that thing behind the scenes. You know, it's one of those things where Jesse could be lying to his audience. If these things are happening, he's lying to his audience. He's presenting himself in a way that's not how he actually is, and that's an issue to be spoken about. And the last one that we are going to watch is the one that really kind of sealed the deal for me on how skeptical I am of these allegations.
There were also a few clues that should have revealed Jesse was a homosexual, long before he ever found out.
He wanted to see if I was willing to have a homosexual relationship with him, of course, because that's what he was all about. He was about putting out feelers there and seeing who he could have sex with. And it didn't work with me because I had not been molested as a boy.
First and foremost, I don't like that he says that. I don't like that he said he couldn't be taken advantage of because he wasn't molested as a boy. It's kind of like victim blaming of like, oh, well, like these, you know, if these men were molested as adults, it's their fault because they were molested as a boy and so they let it happen once they got older. I don't like that. I mean, anybody can be assaulted. Anybody can be harassed. There's not a certain group of people who are the only ones that would fall victim to something like that happening.
And so eventually I told him, look, Jesse, I'm just an angry guy and I don't like these long hugs and all this stuff we're doing, you know, at night.
And did he stop?
Where he would come into my bed and just lay with me.
That's confusing. I don't know if he was saying like, I don't like these things that we're doing at night, you coming in and laying with me, and then he stopped, or I don't like these things that we're doing at night, and then Jesse stopped doing those things, but still continued to go in and lay with him. The way it was set up was kind of confusing to me.
You know,
he would come into your bed and just lay with you?
Yes. And at one time even like put his hand underneath my underwear to go toward my genitals, right? He never got there because he could see I wasn't getting excited. So he never got there. He just like at the edge, you know, because you got to invite the vampire in, is what they say in the vampire movies. And it's sort of true with even psychic vampires like Jesse. And so he would do those kind of tricks or put his hand around my back and up on my chest and be hugging and all that kind of stuff, just to see if maybe I could get, and asking me if, how does it feel? And it feels good, right? And all that kind of stuff. And I would meekly answer, yeah, it feels good. But only because when you're under that kind of pressure, you just give the answer that he wants, but you're really like wanting to get the heck out of there. You're like ready to fly out of there like a bat out of hell.
So in that clip, obviously you heard that Jesse allegedly was trying to reach down this man's pants, get him aroused, engage in sexual activity with him, but Jesse stopped because he noticed that that man was not aroused. And now again, that doesn't mean that Jesse didn't make him uncomfortable. That doesn't mean that Jesse didn't sexually harass him or anybody else. But again, when we're framing it as if he is a homo super predator, but then you have people telling stories of interactions they saw Jesse have with other grown adult men where things seemed to be coming from both sides. And then you have this man saying, you know, once he saw I wasn't aroused, he stopped. I think they're painting it a lot more dramatic than it may have actually happened. And so again, that does not mean that Jesse didn't harass anybody, make them feel uncomfortable, coerce anyone into doing what he wanted them to do, even though they didn't want to do it. Like, those things very well could have happened. So all in all, it's very possible that these things happened. And I do think that's an important conversation to have. It's important to talk about coercive control, power imbalances, taking advantage of something that someone else might feel ashamed of in order to control them and manipulate them. Those are all really important conversations to have. And if these people are credible and they're really just trying to get the word out there that Jesse is not a safe person to be around, I wish the documentary had painted it in a different way and made it so it was a little bit more reasonable. Because like I said, it feels like they're trying to make it more of a gotcha moment about Jesse possibly having sexual or romantic attraction to men, as opposed to talking about the ways in which people can be taken advantage of and saying, like, you know, Jesse's not a trustworthy person. He's not a safe person to be around. There's elements of sexual harassment because he knew that I would be ashamed of this, or he knew that I had this attraction, but I didn't want to do anything about it, and he made me uncomfortable. Like, those are all valid things. Those are valid points to talk about, but you lose some of the impact when you present it in such a way as to where it just feels like you're being bigoted against him. You're being bigoted because you think that he's gay, and that's why you have an issue, as opposed to the more intricate dynamics of what may or may not have actually happened. I know this was an odd video, definitely an interesting topic to discuss, but that's just how I feel about it. Please do let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and if you would consider liking this video or subscribing to my channel, that would be incredible. And if you're subscribed already, thank you so much. I am so appreciative of you. I love being able to just sit here, hang out with you, and talk about whatever. Thank you so much for watching. Please be kind to people, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.